Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone.
Authorities in Gwinnett County, Georgia say that 3 young women are in custody and are facing charges following a bizarre and violent broad daylight brawl last month, one that was apparently over a prom dress. The whole thing unfolded back on February 26th at a racetrack station just outside the city of Norcross. According to reports, an 18-year-old woman who has not been identified by name had traveled there that afternoon to sell a prom dress to her now former friend, 20-year-old Morgan Flincham. It seems that the prom dress in question had quite the convoluted history. It said that Flincham was the original owner, but that the dress was in the 18-year-old's possession at the time and that her mother had partially paid for it. Apparently, the woman had arranged to meet with the understanding that Flincham would be buying the rest of the dress outright. After they both arrived at the gas station, Flincham asked if she could try the dress on in a business bathroom, to which the 18-year-old agreed. However, this was allegedly a setup. As soon as they went inside, a friend of Flincham's was waiting there who snatched the dress and bolted. The 18-year-old ran outside, only to discover that another one of Flincham's friends was waiting there. The situation would have been a 3-on-1 if it weren't for the fact that the teen brought her boyfriend with her. The boyfriend was apparently able to wrestle the prom dress away from the 2 accomplices. However, that didn't stop the girls from attacking the 18-year-old victim. Footage captured by the gas station's surveillance system shows a number of scuffles between the women, including one particularly wild moment when one of the suspects begins choking the teen victim from behind. As you can see, the exchange ended with the 18-year-old flipping her attacker over and body slamming her on the pavement. When police were called and arrived at the scene, all 3 of the female suspects were arrested. In addition to Flincham, the 2 other women have been identified as Lilia DeJager and Kaylee Georgia. All 3 of them have now been charged with theft by taking, while Flincham and DeJager are each facing an additional charge of battery. Following the arrests, a corporal with Gwinnett County Police said of the strange situation, quote, "I would say it's not normally something we have to investigate, an argument over a prom dress." However, the department reminded the public that they have designated areas at all of their precincts for transactions like these to make them safer for both buyers and sellers.
The star of a reality TV show dedicated to paranormal activity unexpectedly found himself in a spooky situation much closer to home last week when his wife was accused of trying to organize a disturbing plot to have him killed. The would-be victim, Aaron Goodwin, who is one of the stars of the long-running television show Ghost Adventures, apparently thought he was in a happy relationship. He and his 32-year-old wife, Victoria, lived together in their home in Las Vegas and had gotten married in the summer of 2022. From the outside looking in, they seemed like they were the perfect couple, with the paranormal-obsessed pair even fittingly tying the knot at Disneyland's Haunted Mansion in California. However, Victoria secretly wanted out and was allegedly willing to go to extreme lengths to end things. While it's not clear exactly what went on in the relationship over the past couple of years, what we do know is that sometime in 2024, Victoria began communicating with a man named Grant Amato. If that name sounds familiar to you, there's a good reason why. You see, Amato is a convicted killer who murdered his entire family in 2019 after stealing $200,000 to send to a Bulgarian cam girl who he believed was in love with him. Though Amato is currently serving a life sentence in Florida, Victoria apparently became pen pals with him after watching a crime documentary about the case. During that correspondence, the pair started a little romance of their own. That's when Victoria allegedly began revealing her true feelings and intentions. She claimed that her husband Aaron wouldn't grant her a divorce and started saying that she was thinking about making other arrangements. At one point, she asked Amato if she was a bad person if she, quote, chose to end his existence, not divorce. It turned out Amato was more than happy to help out. According to police, by October of 2024, Amato and Victoria were actively planning to kill Aaron. With Amato messaging Victoria, he was reaching out to someone, quote, who will be taking care of the situation. Around that same time, he began corresponding with a hitman, and Victoria allegedly agreed to pay $11,500 for the murder. She eventually put down a $2,500 deposit, texting Amato, quote, so anxious, LOLOL. Police haven't yet released exactly what happened with the whole situation, but from the sounds of it, the plot was only uncovered after Amato got the cell phone he was using in prison confiscated for contraband. Prior to that, he had reportedly been in regular communication with the hired killer, using information he received from Victoria about Aaron's whereabouts to try and plan the hit while he was filming in California for his TV show. Victoria was arrested on March 6th and is now facing charges of solicitation to commit murder and conspiracy to commit murder. So far, she has denied any wrongdoing and claims that she was never serious about the murder plot, telling police she and Aaron were merely having problems in their marriage. One of the most disturbing things about the situation is that throughout the time she was allegedly plotting her husband's murder, Victoria apparently continued to act like everything was fine. In posts on social media, she made it seem like things in the marriage were great. Photos on her Instagram show them together on a mini golf date for Valentine's Day last month, and just a week before her arrest, she uploaded another photo of them sitting together with their cat on the couch. The photo was captioned underneath with, quote, "Cuddle puddle with my boys." In a roundabout way, it seems Victoria did get what she wanted in the end, though. This week, it was announced that Aaron Goodwin officially filed for divorce. He is asking the court that she receive no alimony and that their personal assets be fully separated.
Representatives from Pennsylvania's Bethlehem Township Police Department say that a local man has been arrested and is facing charges this week after officers made a shocking discovery inside of his home during a welfare check. The whole thing began on the morning of March 11th when a concerned family member of husband and wife James Christopher Frank and Deborah Glazer called to request the police check up on them. When officers arrived at the property, located on the 2100 block of 3rd Street, they found the place quiet. After banging on all of the doors and windows and receiving no answers, police climbed through a second-story window using a ladder. That's when they realized the place was not, in fact, empty. James Frank was standing there and proceeded to make a series of chilling confessions. He started by stating, quote, "My wife is dead in the bathtub." Upon following Frank into the bathroom, officers found Deborah lying in the tub. She had clearly suffered multiple stab wounds and was no longer alive. Disturbingly, a number of weapons were lying out in the open in the room, including a hammer, mallet, knives, razor blades, and box cutters. In further statements, Frank told officers that he cut Deborah's throat with a steak knife while she was still alive. He also admitted to using a, quote, "knife and hammer to puncture Glazer's chest and heart approximately 10 times. He said he did this to make sure she was dead. What makes the situation even more unsettling is that, so far, it appears police have no idea why Frank did what he did. The couple's neighbors also said they were stunned, as Frank and Deborah had lived at their property for years and it had always been a quiet neighborhood. At the time of this recording, James Frank remains in custody and has been charged with felony criminal homicide. The investigation continues.
Representatives from the Michigan Attorney General's office announced charges against 4 people this week after a young boy was horrifically killed earlier this year while receiving an alternative treatment at a private medical clinic. The awful incident unfolded on the morning of January 31st, when the victim, 5-year-old Thomas Cooper, was taken to the Oxford Center in the city of Troy to undergo hyperbaric oxygen therapy. During these procedures, patients are required to lie down in a sealed tube-shaped device that is filled with extremely high amounts of oxygen. That morning, Thomas was put into the chamber just as he had reportedly been several times before. However, this time something went wrong. Some kind of electrical issue caused a spark, and because of the incredibly oxygen-rich environment inside the tube, the device caught fire and exploded. Thomas's mother, Annie, rushed into the room upon being informed about what had happened and attempted to save her son. Apparently, she sustained serious burns to her arms in the process, but still, there was nothing anyone could do. The young boy was reportedly incinerated in the explosion and fire and was pronounced dead as soon as emergency responders arrived. After launching an investigation into what happened, the state attorney general's office announced this week that the owner of the Oxford Center, 58-year-old Tamala Peterson, and 3 of her employees are now facing charges over the deadly incident. Those 3 employees have been identified as the clinic's safety manager, 64-year-old Jeffrey Mostler, primary management assistant, 65-year-old Gary Markin, as well as the operator of the hyperbaric chamber, 60-year-old Alita Moffett. Peterson, Mostler, and Markin are each facing charges of second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter, while Moffett is facing charges of involuntary manslaughter and intentionally placing false information on a medical chart. While the full details of the investigation have not been released at this time, the attorney's office has alleged that Peterson and her employees deliberately ignored and discarded mandatory safety protocols for the operation of the hyperbaric chamber. In a statement, a representative stated, quote, "This tragedy could have been prevented if proper safety protocols were followed. Instead, deliberate negligence and a blatant disregard for safety cost a child his life." What's perhaps equally tragic about the whole thing is that the treatment Thomas was receiving at the clinic was reportedly questionable at best. While hyperbaric chambers have a variety of well-established uses, in the past few years more and more clinics have popped up advertising them to treat conditions with no scientific support or proof. This includes ADHD, which is apparently one of the things the Oxford Center claimed they were helping Thomas with. A heartbreaking obituary for Thomas described him as as a, quote, curious, energetic, smart, outgoing, and thoughtful little boy. His favorite thing to do was play Minecraft on his Nintendo Switch, as he loved to show his mommy and daddy the things he could create. His favorite activities were running, jumping, rolling, and stomping. He wanted to grow up to be a chef because that meant he could cook with mommy and daddy and stay with them forever. At the time of this recording, all 4 of the suspects remain in custody.
Authorities in Sequatchie County, Tennessee say that an angry husband is facing murder charges this week after he allegedly killed a teenager in a fit of rage after finding him in bed with his wife. The whole thing reportedly began sometime early on March 8th when a 31-year-old woman named Jada Golston showed up at a local hospital with several stab wounds. When questioned about what had happened to her, Golston told police that a, quote, man had jumped on her boyfriend while they were in bed. When officers responded to the residence in question, though, located in the city of Dunlap, they discovered that the attacker wasn't just some random man as Golston had claimed. Upon arriving, they found her 41-year-old husband, Jonathan Belk, standing in the doorway with cuts on his hands and covered in blood. As they investigated further, police stumbled across something awful. The body of a young man, later identified as 18-year-old Billie Jean Floyd, was inside the home. The teen had been stabbed multiple times and stuffed into a garbage can in the fetal position. Authorities now say that Belk murdered Billie after coming home from a trip early that morning and discovering his wife and the teen getting intimate together. While attacking them both, he allegedly killed Billie and was in the process of disposing of his remains when police arrived. Despite the horrific act of violence that had just happened, it appears that Belk's priorities were firmly elsewhere. According to an affidavit released this week, when deputies asked Belk if he had any concerns at the time of his arrest, he told them, quote, I am worried about my relationship with my wife due to the fact that I offed him. An obituary released for Billy stated that he had turned 18 just 3 days before the deadly attack. It reads in part, quote, he enjoyed hunting, fishing, four-wheelers, and working on everything. He mostly enjoyed spending time with his family and friends. At the time of this recording, Jonathan Belk remains in custody on several charges, including criminal homicide.
Representatives from the FBI say that a 31-year-old man is facing charges this week after he had a strange and violent freakout aboard a plane, one in which he apparently believed he and his sister were under attack by evil minions sent by the devil himself. The whole thing unfolded sometime on the evening of March 11th aboard American Airlines Flight 4162. The plane was scheduled to fly from Savannah, Georgia to Miami, Florida. However, things quickly descended into chaos on board shortly after taking off. Less than a minute after the plane left the ground, a passenger, later identified as 31-year-old Delonge Augustin, began yelling, stomping, and shaking in his seat. He was apparently doing this so uncontrollably that initially the crew thought he was having a seizure. That changed, though, when a flight attendant went to check to make sure that Augustin was okay. They were thanked for their concern by being kicked in the chest by the 31-year-old so forcefully that it sent them flying across the aisle and into a far window. Upon hearing the commotion in the cabin and learning what was going on, the pilots immediately turned the plane around. Unfortunately, this did little to calm the situation down, as Augustin reportedly only grew more violent as they touched down and headed back towards the gate. At one point, Augustin managed to get up out of his seat entirely, storming to the front of the aircraft while clutching his sister, Magina, and threw several punches before finally being restrained by 3 passengers. Thankfully, they were able to hold him until airport security and police arrived to place him under arrest. Before he could be properly taken into custody, though, Augustin first needed to be taken to the hospital. This was because, among other things, the 31-year-old had apparently been swallowing rosary beads throughout his mile-high meltdown. That brings us to the purported reason for all of this, which Augustin and his sister were not shy about sharing. The 31-year-old claimed that they were fleeing, quote, religious attacks of a spiritual nature, and that, quote, Satan's disciples had followed them onto the plane and did not want them to make it to Haiti. For her part, it seems that the sister, Magina Augustin, was fully on board with the crazy. She told investigators that she had never experienced as much darkness as was on the plane that evening, and said that she was, quote, not surprised that her brother had hurt anyone because he hurts evil. Augustin is now facing several charges, including felony property damage, misdemeanor battery, and misdemeanor obstruction of police. According to reports, the American Airlines flight did finally make it to their destination that night, albeit more than 3 hours behind schedule.
Authorities in Ocean County, New Jersey say that a long-running feud between neighbors came to a bloody and terrifying end this week after a man shot a husband and wife during the middle of a rage-fueled attack before turning his weapon on himself. The whole thing began around 4:45 p.m. on March 10th when police were called about a violent incident in Berkeley Township.
911, where's your
neighbor? We got shot by our neighbor, 11 Drake Drive. Please hurry. My husband, I think, is dead outside, and my leg is killing me.
Okay, where are you shot, ma'am?
I'm in the left leg. My husband, I think, he's
okay.
At least 3 rounds. Oh, my gosh.
Residents on Drake Drive, located in a very affluent area along the Jersey Shore, told 911 dispatchers that they had heard what they believed were gunshots coming from outside one of the million-dollar mansions there. When officers arrived at the home in question, they found 2 people, husband and wife Tom and Jill Kwiatkowski, both of whom were suffering gunshot wounds. Tom was lying outside their home while Jill was inside, and the pair were both rushed to a nearby hospital. As this was happening, attention quickly turned to one of the couple's next-door neighbors, 54-year-old John Adamo. Witnesses said that they had seen and heard Adamo attack Tom and Jill before heading back into his own house. By the time police went over to the residence, Adamo had barricaded himself inside and refused to come out. The SWAT team was called in, and for approximately 2 hours, authorities attempted to negotiate with the 54-year-old, but they had no luck. Finally, the decision was made to blow the front door to the residence off its hinges. Following the dramatic entrance, police found Adamo dead in his upstairs bedroom. He had turned his weapon on himself sometime after barricading himself inside. Initially, there were concerns about a pressure cooker that was also found in the room. However, it was discovered that this was not rigged to explode. Thankfully, it's been reported that Tom and Jill Kwiatkowski survived the shooting, but it seems they're not out of the woods yet, so to speak. At the time of this recording, they both remain in the hospital in critical but stable condition. As for what caused all of this, authorities haven't officially confirmed anything, though it's been widely reported that Adamo and the Kwiatkowskis had been feuding for years. The exact nature of what the feud was about is not known, but several other residents in the area stated that Adamo was known for being combative and had problems with alcohol that he refused to acknowledge. At least one neighbor referred to him as a nut job. It's believed that what may have specifically pushed the 54-year-old over the edge was a decision by the Kwiatkowskis to put up new cameras and no trespassing signs on their property. Some of these cameras reportedly pointed towards Adamo's home, and the no trespassing sign called him and his wife out by name. According to witnesses, Adamo was seen ripping down one of these cameras shortly before things escalated to violence. It's said that this caused an argument and that Adamo shot Tom outside before shooting Jill, who was still in the house. Currently, the investigation into the terrifying and tragic incident continues.
Authorities in the city of Waterbury, Connecticut released absolutely chilling details in an ongoing investigation this week, announcing that they had charged a local woman after it was revealed that she had held her stepson captive under horrendous conditions for over 20 years. The case began back on the night of February 17th, when emergency responders were called about a house fire at a residence on Blake Street. They arrived to find 56-year-old Kimberly Sullivan, who had managed to escape from the burning home.
Come on, come down.
Come on, down.
Who else is in the house? Who else is in here?
My stepson is in here.
Upon learning that someone else was inside, firefighters headed in and were able to rescue an adult man. He had suffered smoke inhalation and other injuries because of the fire, but it was immediately clear that wasn't all that was going on here. The man was extremely emaciated and looked as though he hadn't cleaned himself in quite some time. Despite being 32 years old, he weighed just 68 pounds. He also confessed to being the person that had started the fire that evening, though said that he had a good reason. Ominously, he then stated, quote, "I wanted my freedom." The 32-year-old explained exactly what he meant by this over a series of harrowing interviews with police. In those interviews, he told investigators that he had been held captive by Kimberly Sullivan, who was his stepmother, for more than 20 years. Though many of the details surrounding the situation still have yet to be revealed at this time, what police have said is that the man was a prisoner in the Blake Street home where the fire took place from the time that he was 10 or 11 years old. For the last 2 decades, his life had been a non-stop real-life nightmare. The man explained that he spent nearly all of his time in a cramped 9 by 8 foot storage space on the second floor of the house that was bolted shut from the outside. He was let out only to do chores, which took him between 15 minutes and 2 hours daily. He was given just 2 cups of water per day or less, as well as 2 small sandwiches. Heartbreakingly, when asked if he was hungry by police, he stated, quote, "All day, every day, my entire life. Because the amount of water he was given was nowhere near enough, he was forced to do desperate things to survive. This included sneaking drinks from the toilet bowls in the house whenever he got the chance. This was far from the only way that the 32-year-old had been forced to get creative to survive, though. Because he was given access to essentially no personal hygiene products or a bathroom, he came up with his own makeshift systems. After urinating in bottles, he would use a series of straws he connected into a tube to drain them through a hole in the window. When he needed to defecate, he would do it on a newspaper, tying it up with bits of string from old t-shirts, throwing the bundles out whenever he got the chance. By saving little bits of the minuscule amounts of drinking water he was given, he attempted to clean himself the best he could. Still, as you might imagine, these makeshift solutions only got him so far. By the time he set the fire out of desperation, he hadn't showered properly in over 2 years. He hadn't had a haircut in 3 and couldn't remember the last time he'd received medical or dental care. After all of this was unearthed, police arrested Kimberly Sullivan and charged her with a litany of offenses, including first-degree assault, second-degree kidnapping, and first-degree unlawful restraint. She has reportedly denied any wrongdoing whatsoever. As if this story wasn't infuriating enough, some are now speaking out saying that authorities should have known about what was going on much earlier. The 32-year-old victim's former elementary school principal told reporters during an interview that he and other teachers had been concerned about the man since he was 5 years old. The principal alleges that the abuse that was going on in the house started long before the man was kept in full-time custody. He also said that it was obvious to him and other teachers at the school that something was wrong. As a boy, he was always trying to steal or obtain food and was even eating from the trash because he was being starved at home. The principal claims he and other staff alerted the Department of Children and Families and tried to do what they could for him, including bringing extra food. However, it was around this time that Sullivan reportedly pulled him out of school. After that, it seems a thorough investigation was never done. At the time of this recording, Kimberly Sullivan remains in custody in lieu of a $300,000 bond. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.